The whispers of the townsfolk trailed behind Olivia Parker like persistent shadows, as she stood alone at the front of the small whitewashed church in Willow Creek, Wyoming territory. It was 1878, and the summer heat pressed through the windows, making the delicate lace of her wedding dress cling to her trembling body. The pews were filled with curious onlookers, but the space beside her remained conspicuously empty. No father to give her away, no brother to stand in his place, no family friend to offer their arm. The man who had promised to marry her had disappeared 3 days ago, taking with him her modest dowry and leaving behind only humiliation. "Should we begin?" Reverend Phillips whispered, his kind eyes clouded with concern. The murmurs from the congregation grew louder with each passing minute. Olivia clutched her small bouquet of wildflowers tighter, the stems bending under her grip. She had sewn this dress by hand, working late into the night for weeks. "Just a few more minutes, please," she managed, her voice hardly audible over the buzzing whispers. The church door creaked open, sending a shaft of blinding sunlight across the wooden floorboards. Olivia turned, hope fluttering in her chest despite knowing better. It wasn't her betrothed, Harold Miller, returning with apologies and excuses. Instead, a tall figure stood backlit in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. The stranger stepped inside, removing his hat to reveal sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a storm-washed sky. Dust from the trail clung to his clothes, marking him as someone just arrived in town. His gaze locked with Olivia's, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of souls that had never met, but somehow knew each other. The stranger, a cowboy by the look of his worn leather chaps and spurs, walked deliberately down the aisle, ignoring the startled glances from the townspeople. He stopped beside Olivia and spoke quietly, his voice like distant thunder rolling across the plains. "Jacob Thornton, madam. I couldn't help but notice you might be in need of some assistance." Olivia stared at the calloused hand he extended toward her. This man was a stranger, dangerous perhaps, and yet in that moment, his presence felt more familiar than anything in the small town she'd called home for the past year. "I don't know you, sir," she whispered. "No, madam, you don't, but I reckon nobody should have to stand alone on a day like this." Mrs. Henderson, the town gossip, leaned forward in her pew. "That's Olivia Parker. Poor thing was supposed to marry Harold Miller, but he ran off with her money." Shameful business. Jacob's jaw tightened at this news, but his eyes remained fixed on Olivia. "What do you say, Miss Parker? Would you allow me the honor of walking with you, not down the aisle, mind you, but perhaps out those doors to wherever you might wish to go instead?" Olivia looked past him to the faces of the townsfolk, some sympathetic, others barely concealing their satisfaction at her misfortune. This town had never truly accepted her since she'd arrived on the stagecoach last spring, seeking a fresh start after her parents' deaths. There was nothing for her here now. With unexpected steadiness, she placed her hand in Jacob's. "I believe I would like that very much, Mr. Thornton." A collective gasp rippled through the church as Jacob tucked her hand into the crook of his arm and led her back down the aisle. Reverend Phillips merely nodded, a small smile playing at his lips as they passed. The moment they stepped outside into the bright Wyoming sunshine, Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Jacob led her to a hitching post where a magnificent chestnut stallion stood waiting. "Where would you like to go, Miss Parker?" he asked, his voice gentle. Olivia hesitated only briefly before replying, "Anywhere but here." Jacob helped her mount the horse, carefully arranging her wedding dress before swinging up behind her. As they rode away from the church and the staring townspeople, Olivia found herself leaning back against the solid warmth of this stranger's chest. It was improper, scandalous even, but she couldn't bring herself to care anymore. "Why?" she asked as they passed the town limits. "Why would you do this for someone you don't know?" Jacob was silent for a long moment, the only sound the steady rhythm of his horse's hooves on the dusty road. Finally, he spoke, his breath warm against her ear. 5 years ago, I stood in a church much like that one, waiting for a bride who never came. No one offered me an escape then. I couldn't stand by and watch someone else endure that alone. Olivia turned slightly to study his profile. The hard lines of his face told of years under the open sky, of battles fought and survived. Where are we going? I have a small ranch about 10 miles north of here. You're welcome to stay until you decide what's next for you, or I can take you to the next town over if you prefer. Your ranch, Olivia decided without hesitation. Just until I figure things out. As they rode, the rolling landscape of Wyoming stretched before them, wild and beautiful. Olivia felt something stir within her that she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, fragile but persistent, like the first green shoots after a prairie fire. Jacob's ranch came into view as the afternoon sun began its descent. It was modest but well-kept, a sturdy log cabin with a barn and corral nearby, nestled against a backdrop of pine-covered hills. A small creek wound through the property, catching the golden light. "It's not much," Jacob said as he helped her down from the horse, "but it's peaceful." "It's beautiful," Olivia replied honestly, taking in the wildflowers dotting the meadow and the distant mountains standing guard. Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, solid wooden furniture, and shelves lined with books, an unexpected touch that made Olivia smile. "You can take the bedroom," Jacob offered, gesturing to a door off the main room. "I'll sleep out here." "I couldn't possibly, please," he interrupted gently. "My mother raised me better than to let a lady sleep on a lumpy old sofa." Olivia wanted to argue, but exhaustion swept over her suddenly, the events of the day catching up all at once. "Thank you," she managed, the words inadequate for the gratitude she felt. That evening they shared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee. Jacob didn't press her with questions, allowing comfortable silence to settle between them. It was only as they finished eating that Olivia felt ready to share her story. "I came to Willow Creek last spring after my parents died of fever back in Pennsylvania," she began, staring into her coffee cup. "I had some money saved, enough to start over. Harold, he seemed kind at first. He owned the general store, was respected in town. When he proposed, it seemed like Providence." Jacob listened intently, his face betraying nothing but attentiveness. "3 days ago, he asked if he could hold my savings, said he needed to pay for our wedding trip. I gave him everything." Olivia's voice cracked. "By morning, he was gone, left a note saying the store was deeply in debt and he'd gone to seek his fortune in California." Jacob's hands tightened around his cup. Men like that deserve a different fate than California. "The worst part wasn't losing the money," Olivia continued. "It was standing in that church today, seeing the looks on everyone's faces. They all knew. Some of them probably suspected what kind of man he was all along." "Their failure to warn you speaks more about their character than yours," Jacob said firmly. "You have nothing to be ashamed of." Olivia looked up, meeting his steady gaze. "No one's ever put it quite that way before." "It's the truth." Jacob stood and collected their dishes. "You should rest. Tomorrow's a new day." That night, wrapped in unfamiliar blankets in a stranger's home, Olivia expected to lie awake replaying the humiliation of the day. Instead, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, lulled by the sound of the creek outside and the occasional creaking of floorboards as Jacob moved around the main room. Morning came with golden light streaming through the window and the scent of coffee brewing. Olivia dressed quickly in her simple traveling clothes that Jacob had thoughtfully retrieved from the church where she'd left them, planning to change after the ceremony. Her wedding dress lay carefully folded on a chair, a beautiful reminder of dreams deferred. In the main room, Jacob stood at the stove, frying bacon. He turned at her entrance, offering a small smile. "Good morning. Hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," Olivia admitted. She moved to help him with breakfast, and they worked together with surprising ease, as if they'd shared a kitchen for years rather than hours. Over breakfast, Jacob laid out her options. The stagecoach passes through Silver Junction about 5 miles from here every Tuesday. I could take you there if you want to head back east. Or there's work to be had in Riverdale, about 20 miles north. They've got a hotel that might need help, and the schoolteacher there is looking to retire soon. Olivia considered these choices, then asked hesitantly, "Is there a third option?" Jacob raised an eyebrow in question. "I could stay here," she suggested, surprising herself with her boldness. "Just for a while. I'm a hard worker, I can cook, clean, so I won't be a burden." Jacob studied her for a long moment, those storm blue eyes unreadable. "This isn't about having help around the place, Miss Parker. I manage fine on my own. But if you want to stay, you're welcome to, for as long as you need." "Thank you," Olivia said, relief washing over her. The thought of facing another new town, more strangers, more explanations, had been overwhelming. "And please call me Olivia." "Olivia," he repeated, the name sounding different in his deep voice. "Then you must call me Jacob." The days that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Olivia took over the cooking and mending while Jacob tended to the ranch work. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sometimes reading from Jacob's collection of books, sometimes sharing stories of their lives before Willow Creek. Jacob, she learned, had grown up in Texas, the son of a rancher. He'd fought briefly for the Confederacy during the war, more out of obligation than belief, and had wandered north afterward, unable to reconcile with what he'd seen. His broken engagement had sent him further into solitude, leading him to this remote patch of Wyoming where he raised horses and occasionally worked as a guide for hunting parties. "What brought you to Willow Creek that day?" Olivia asked one evening, nearly 2 weeks after her non-wedding. "It seems like more than coincidence." Jacob placed another log on the fire before answering. "I'd been up in the mountains, tracking a mountain lion that had been troubling some homesteaders. On my way back, I stopped in town for supplies. Heard talk at the general store about a wedding at the church and about a bride left without a groom." "So you came out of curiosity," he shook his head. "I came because I remembered how it felt, standing there alone with everyone watching. No one deserves that." Olivia watched the firelight play across his features, highlighting the strength in his jaw, the kindness in his eyes. "I'm glad you did." As summer progressed into autumn, Olivia found herself feeling more at home on Jacob's small ranch than she ever had in Willow Creek. They worked side by side, fixing the roof before the winter snow, preserving the garden's harvest, preparing the animals for the coming cold. Their conversations grew deeper, their silences more comfortable. Occasionally, they rode into Silver Junction for supplies, where Jacob introduced her simply as Miss Olivia Parker, my friend. If the shopkeepers and townsfolk wondered about their arrangement, they were polite enough not to ask directly. In this part of the territory, people respected privacy and self-sufficiency above all. It was during one such trip in late September that they encountered trouble. They were loading supplies onto Jacob's wagon when 3 rough-looking men approached, their swagger and the smell of whiskey announcing their intentions before they spoke. "Well, look here, boys," said the tallest of the 3, his beard tangled and dirty. "Ain't she a pretty little thing to be out here in the wilderness?" Jacob stepped between Olivia and the men, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. "Gentlemen, we're just finishing our business and heading home." The bearded man leered over Jacob's shoulder at Olivia. "I heard about you in Willow Creek. The jilted bride, ain't that right? Left standing at the altar with her dowry stolen. Tragic tale." Olivia felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. News traveled fast in the territory, it seemed. "You'll want to move along now," Jacob said quietly, but there was steel in his voice that hadn't been there before. "Or what, Cowboy?" The second man stepped forward, revealing a pistol tucked into his belt. 3 against 1 ain't good odds even for a tough fella like you." The tension in the air thickened. Olivia noticed Jacob's hand drift toward his own holster, and her heart raced with fear. She'd seen violence in the towns she'd passed through, knew how quickly situations like this could turn deadly. Is there a problem here? A new voice joined the confrontation, the town sheriff, approaching with a hand resting casually on his gun belt. The bearded man gave a mock bow. "No problem at all, Sheriff, just greeting some visitors to our fine town." "Then I suggest you continue your day elsewhere," the sheriff replied evenly. "Mr. Thornton is a respected man in these parts, and the lady deserves your courtesy." The three men exchanged glances before backing away, muttering under their breath. "Sorry about that, Jacob," the sheriff said when they were gone. "Those are some of Jenkins' men from over Deadwood Way. Here for supplies, been drinking since dawn." "No harm done, Sheriff. Thank you for stepping in." As they rode home, Olivia remained unusually quiet, the encounter having stirred up painful memories of her humiliation. Jacob seemed to sense her mood, giving her space until they were almost back to the ranch. "What those men said about Willow Creek," he began carefully, "does it still hurt to hear it spoken of?" Olivia considered his question, surprised to realize the truth. "Not as much as it should, perhaps." "The hurt has faded. What once felt like an ending now seems more like a beginning." Jacob smiled at that. "Beginnings are good, they hold promise." That night, as they sat on the porch watching stars appear in the darkening sky, Olivia made a decision. "I think it's time I figured out what comes next," she said softly. "I can't stay here indefinitely, living off your kindness." Jacob turned to her, his expression serious in the fading light. "Is that what you think you're doing, living off kindness, isn't it? You've given me shelter, food, protection, asked for nothing in return." "You've given plenty in return, Olivia. This place hasn't felt like a home in years. Not until you came." His words hung in the cool, evening air between them, laden with meaning. Olivia felt her heart quicken as Jacob reached across the space separating them, taking her hand in his. "I'm not good with words," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "Never have been, but I need you to know that you're not a burden or a charity case. You're—" He faltered, searching for the right words. "You've become essential to this place, to me." Olivia looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, roughened by years of honest work. "I feel the same," she whispered. "When I'm with you, I feel like I've found something I didn't know I was looking for." Jacob's other hand came up to gently tilt her face toward his. "Stay then, not as my guest or my helper, but as—" He hesitated, then continued with quiet certainty, "as whatever you want to be." In the silver moonlight, Olivia could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear of rejection battling with hope. Slowly, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them until their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Inside the cabin, Olivia and Jacob created their own warmth, learning each other's hearts as thoroughly as they'd learned each other's habits. Their love grew quietly, like winter wheat beneath the snow, nurtured by shared work, respect, and the gentle discovery of each other. They married on Christmas Day, a small ceremony in Silver Junction with only the preacher and his wife as witnesses. Olivia wore a simple blue dress she'd made herself, with snowflakes embroidered along the hem, nothing like the elaborate wedding gown that still hung in the back of the wardrobe, a reminder of paths not taken. "Are you sure about this?" Jacob asked as they stood together before the preacher. "Marrying a rough cowboy who barely owns more than the land he stands on," Olivia squeezed his hand. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The new year brought changes to the ranch. With Olivia's encouragement, Jacob began expanding their horse breeding operation, focusing on strong, intelligent mounts that quickly gained reputation among the ranchers and lawmen of the territory. Olivia started a small school in their home, teaching the children from neighboring homesteads who had no access to formal education. Spring arrived with unexpected news. Olivia was expecting their first child. The prospect of parenthood filled them both with joy and trepidation. "What if I'm not good at this?" Jacob worried one night, his hand resting protectively on Olivia's growing belly. "My own father was harsh. I don't know how to be different." "You already are different," Olivia assured him, covering his hand with hers. I've seen how gentle you are with the foals, how patient with the children who come for lessons. Our child will be blessed to have you as a father." Their daughter, Emma Rose Thornton, was born as autumn painted the hills in red and gold. She had her father's storm blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. Jacob cradled her with hands that had broken wild horses and built fences, now infinitely careful with this tiny new life. "She's perfect," he whispered, awe in his voice. Olivia watched them together, her heart so full it ached. "She is, and so is this life we've made." The years that followed brought more children, twin boys named Samuel and Matthew, and another daughter they called Grace. The ranch prospered, growing to include more land, more horses, and eventually a proper schoolhouse where Olivia taught not just their children but those from miles around. News came occasionally from Willow Creek. Harold Miller had indeed gone to California, but had found no fortune there, only more debt and eventually a prison cell for fraud. The town itself had grown, connected now to the expanding railroad network that was changing the West forever. One summer day in 1885, nearly 7 years after Jacob had walked into that church in Willow Creek, they received unexpected visitors. A stagecoach appeared on the horizon, making its way up the long drive to their ranch house. Jacob and Olivia, who had been working together in the vegetable garden, stood to welcome whoever might be calling. From the coach emerged Reverend Phillips, older now but still recognizable, and beside him, Mrs. Henderson, the once notorious gossip of Willow Creek. "Mrs. Thornton," the Reverend greeted Olivia warmly. "You look well, happiness suits you." "Reverend Mrs. Henderson," Olivia nodded, surprise evident in her voice. "This is unexpected. What brings you all the way out here?" Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, looking somewhat abashed. "I've come to make amends, my dear. I was unkind in my thoughts and words when you lived among us. When we heard how well you'd done, how respected you both are in these parts, I felt compelled to offer my apology." Jacob came to stand beside his wife, a supportive hand at the small of her back. "That's mighty decent of you, madam. We've also come with news," Reverend Phillips added. "The town council is establishing a proper academy in Willow Creek. We'd like to offer you the position of headmistress, Mrs. Thornton. Your reputation as an educator has spread throughout the territory." Olivia was momentarily speechless. Once, such an offer would have seemed like a dream respectability purpose, a chance to return to town in triumph rather than shame. Jacob squeezed her hand gently. "That's quite an honor, Liv." Their eyes met in silent communication, 7 years of love and understanding flowing between them. Olivia turned back to their visitors with a gentle smile. "I'm deeply honored by your offer, Reverend, but my place is here. This ranch, this family, this is my life's work now." After their visitors departed, Jacob and Olivia walked hand in hand to the crest of a small hill overlooking their property. Below, their children played near the creek while the horses grazed peacefully in the meadow. The house and barn stood solid against the backdrop of mountains, testament to years of hard work and shared dreams. "You could have gone back," Jacob said softly. "Shown them all what they missed out on by not standing by you." Olivia leaned against his shoulder, watching their life unfold below. "There's nothing to prove, not anymore. That day in the church, when you took my hand and walked me out those doors, that was the real beginning. Everything that matters came after." Jacob turned to her, the setting sun gilding his features, the same features that had captivated her on that fateful day. There were more lines around his eyes now, silver threading through his hair at the temples, but the steadiness, the quiet strength that had been her harbor in the storm that remained unchanged. "I promised myself that day that I would walk with you for as long as you'd allow," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "I had no idea then what a gift that would be." "Forever," Olivia whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him as the Wyoming sunset painted the sky in colors no artist could capture. "We'll walk together forever." As darkness fell and stars appeared in the vast western sky, They made their way back to the house where lamps glowed in windows and children's laughter echoed from within. The path they walked was one they had forged together, step by step, day by day, from a moment of despair in a small town church to this rich, full life they'd built from nothing but courage and love. And in the years that followed, as their children grew and the century turned, bringing changes neither could have imagined that summer day in 1878, Jacob and Olivia Thornton remained what they had become in that first moment, two souls who had recognized each other across a crowded room, who had taken a chance on kindness, and found, in its wake, a love that would indeed last forever.